David, this is dangerous, but Justin just said that you guide the conversation.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm a little
We're
worried about that.
we're gonna it's gonna look like you can't see my pen right now, but it's gonna be this rabbit trail and this
Yeah.
rat's nest of questions and spaghetti.
Yeah.
But we'll get to a point,
We'll get to
and
there.
and eventually but I believe it's gonna be awesome. Super excited about today. Super excited about having Justin on the podcast. Justin, I imagine I'm not alone in this. You probably get this feedback, but your books have disproportionately to our relationship affected my life in an amazing, incredible, positive way. And I'm sure that's feedback you probably get, but there's also I'm imagining tons and tons of people who you will never hear from till we get to heaven that you are impacting
Mm.
through just this amazing your amazing ability to craft a story, which is funny because reading this, I'm like, dude, why is this guy not a full-time author? But I think you give a hint in your book. You're like, dude, this exhausts me. This process exhausts me. But thank you for joining
Yeah.
us today.
No,
Really appreciate it.
you're so welcome, and thanks for saying that, brother. I appreciate it. It is a thing. You write on this side of the screen, and you come up with all these ideas, and it is, you wonder, like, is anybody ever going to take you seriously? So it actually is always encouraging to hear that somebody out there actually is taking it seriously. So I appreciate you saying it.
Hey, we take it so seriously, and we'll highlight this. There's some right before we hit record, were talking about there's some things in my office that are actually directly from your book. The choice drink is not from your book. It's not what you
Yeah.
prescribe, but the sentiment behind it and the actions behind it are
Mm.
very much are directly attributed to and derived from your book. And so much action. And as we dive into this, um, you talk about loneliness, and Sue and I were talking about this before we hit record, but I feel like this loneliness thing is definitely, I want to touch on it briefly, but then I want to get to the meat of the positive, the hope, the action, the friendship elements of your book. But I
Yeah.
think we'd be remiss not to touch on it. But I will also caveat that we've talked about this. If you're a regular listener to the Connect Man podcast, or just you're a friend, we've talked this at length. And at this point, anybody out there who doesn't understand the impact of loneliness, I feel like your head's in the sand because it is
Hmm. Hmm.
so well studied. There's, the 90 years Harvard studies that you talk about, that we've read the books on that.
Right, right.
It is out there. The Surgeon General of the United States highlights it, which again is highlighted in your
Yep.
book. If you
Right.
don't know, it's your fault at this point. But
Hmm.
a slight angle, one thing I did not, that was completely new when I read this book, and I never considered this, is you talked about how God said it is not good for a man to be alone in Genesis.
Right.
I have never thought of it more deeply than God created Eve to
Right.
give Adam a
Right.
partner. I never thought of it from the context of friendship. And just
Right.
those words resonated off the page, like, you are not created to be alone, right? It
Hmm.
is not only that, it is not good for man to be alone. And then you tie that into
Yes.
friendship. So if you don't mind just touching on the loneliness thing, and then let's get into it.
Yeah, I kind of like the way you preface that too, because you can run through all the stats on loneliness, but I think it's kind of like telling a smoker that smoking's unhealthy. They know. We're trying to figure out a different way to show you something more beautiful. And really, friendship is more powerful and beautiful than loneliness is dangerous or bad. And so it's kind of like, what's the positive vision? And I'll say for me, sorry, I'll say for me, I feel like I woke up at some point in my 30s and realized that the difference between all of the people around me who were either fallen off from their faith or their family or their work or their mental health, and those of us who were struggling but sticking with it, was friendship. And there was like this moment where I realized this is the difference maker. Whether you keep people around you makes all the difference, because hard things come for all of us and life is difficult for all of us. But keeping close friends around you is the key thing that changes everything else. And that's what became, I think, more convincingly beautiful to write about. Now, it was helpful, obviously, to look at Genesis and see that this wasn't my idea. This is biblical, but it was a surprise to me too. So I don't know. I could go right into Genesis, but I mean, I had never heard this either. Was this the first time that you had considered that there's something in Genesis for friendship?
First time, and it was the take on that, specifically on that verse, and how you brought that to, you're like, hey, God said this is good, this is good, this is good, and it is not good. Like all the way that you just framed that, I had never thought of it from that perspective,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
never tied it. Not a once in my life have I ever tied it. And I think this is like student our, this is our fourth or fifth time through the Bible in a year. I mean, we've spent some time in this, and I've
sure.
never once considered it from the friendship perspective. I always thought of it from just the Adam and Eve, the
Yeah.
partner, the wife. Yeah.
Well, I will say, I think this was new to me probably in my late 20s, but when it hit me, I mean, it hit me like a bag of rocks. Like this might be one of the most important verses in the Bible. So I've always been, I'd probably say Genesis is my favorite book of the Bible to the extent we play favorites. I love it. And I can't get enough of the creation narrative because it paints a vision of what life was meant to be and what life will be like in the kingdom to come. And so I feel like going over it verse by verse and figuring out like what is here. And you have this, man, I guess I should drink more water today. Something wrong with my throat. Um, you've got this amazing narrative in Genesis 1 of God just loving the world into existence and speaking it, which isn't entirely incorrect. And I don't want to bash it. I mean, to walk with Jesus is the good life. It's just not the full picture to frame it that way because apparently Jesus never calls us to walk with him alone. And here in Genesis, you have this picture of God looking at Adam, them alone in the garden, saying, you can't experience me the way you were made to experience me until you experience me alongside other people. And this is the cue, I think, that relationships are more than physically important for us. They're more than fun. They're more than the meaning, in our life and the memories. They are something vastly spiritual so that we can't walk with Jesus the way that we're meant to until we walk with him beside other people. And that's the beginning of this whole call.
It's interesting, and you said it. I can't remember what chapter it is, but I started and highlighted and wrote it down as a quote. You said it's easy to want real friendship, but it's much harder to try real friendship. And I think that's
Mm,
so true because we all desire relationships. We all want to have great
you're right.
friends, but there's a block. Like there's
Yes.
something is
Yes.
keeping us from actually trying and being in covenant relationships. I'm curious, like what you think that is.
Well, I think the easy Sunday school answer is sin, but
Yeah.
I would flesh that out. Because you see it as the creation narrative continues, right? You see that sin coming into the world is the cause of our hiding. And I think this is really important to contrast. The end of that creation narrative is that God creates Eve for Adam, absolutely an ode to marriage, but also an ode to now community. Adam can experience God around others. And you see this naked and unashamed verse, which again, there's marriage dynamics there, but there's also this relational dynamic of being fully known without shame, right? So fully exposed, nothing to hide without shame. And I think Genesis is coming to a high point here where the writer is showing us that the life we're made for is to be known by God and known by others and loved at the same time. You can be fully known and fully loved. And that's exactly what you see starting to fall apart in Genesis 3 when sin comes into the world. Adam and Eve hide from each other behind fig leaves. They hide from God behind the bushes. There's this vertical hiding, this horizontal hiding. God says, "Where are you?" One of the most poignant verses in the Bible that he knows where they are, but he wants them to know that he's looking for them. There's no reason to hide. And that, let's just bring that forward. We all want relationship. We know it in our bones. We long for people to experience the world with, but it's often left untried because it is so hard and painful. And I think, Stu, if I remember my own book correctly, but it's never a guarantee. I think that's from the chapter on forgiveness, if I'm not mistaken, because you know, as I like to say that friendships have two ingredients, a sinner and a sinner. And so there are going to be problems. And if you can't figure out how to forgive and how to confront and how to deal with pain and difficulty, you can't do friendship. I mean, just put that simply. If you can't do forgiveness, you can't do friendship. And I think that's a lot of the reason why we all want friends, but we leave it untried because honestly, it is hard. It is a place of pain. It's kind of like working out. Everybody wants to like be more healthy. It's just most of us realize I don't want that pain that stands in between me and health. But like working out, it's like the life that you're looking for, everything that you've been looking for is on the other side of relational difficulties. Of course, you have to forgive. Of course, you have to apologize. Of course, you have to work through stuff with friends. But that very thing that you're looking for is on the other side of that. And it's called friendship.
Yeah, I love that. And you know, a lot of people just who see Stu and I hang out and potentially even the podcast, you know, there's a lot of sentiment of, oh man, it's awesome. You guys are such good friends and this and that. But and I will attest that there are times too where it's really difficult. I mean, once you get to know Stu, you also get to realize like it is difficult being his friend, regardless. Not only
It's like
you have
charity.
to
It's like
look at
charity.
him, but in all seriousness, in all honesty, like there are plenty of times that it's very tense and there's but you come through that, and I think you know you make a great point in that friendship at some point in the book you talked about um that a lot of reasons people don't ever get to this level too is because once they experience some of that difficulty, that tension, they just go on to, well, I'm gonna go find a better friend. Similar to
Right,
marriage,
right, right, right.
I'm gonna get divorced.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm gonna go
yeah.
find the one, and what the divorce rate's like 50%, and the second marriage
Mhm.
is like 60 to 70%, and the third is like 80, right? Because you never get there, you never find it. And friendship is the
Right.
same, but the richness in digging into that. And I love you start the book with this, and it just the quote, not only was it funny, but I literally just did this today. The book opens with we often talk about you two moments. You talk about you two moments, like, oh,
Yeah,
really?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
you experienced that as well. And you and C.S. Lewis beautifully describe this, the beginning of friendship. You say that you characterize it as, or I think C.S. Lewis's words, but you know you
Yep,
you
yep,
really
yep.
anchored on it, the semi-articulate fumblings
Yes.
of, should we be best friends, right? Should,
Uh-huh.
should we
Yeah.
be best friends? And the awkwardness behind that. But I will tell you, it gets so much easier. Today I called the guy. I'm like, hey man, I would really like to invest in our relationship. You're
Yeah,
here
yeah,
local, I'm here
yeah,
local, and
yeah.
do you want to be friends? And dude,
Yeah.
it was
Are
funny.
you,
Like
are
we
you cheating on me,
laughed.
dude? Are you cheating on me?
I didn't say best friends. I said
Oh,
friends.
oh, okay. Okay.
Let's. I want to be. I said I want to go much deeper in a relationship with you.
Fair.
Ultimately, caveat, to replace Stu because you know. But in that, I'm just curious. Do you believe that this awkwardness is something that you just have to get comfortable with if you
Yes.
truly desire to live
Yes.
deeper? And I want to hear it from you as well. Does it not get easier to be that awkward, or does it for you? Because for me it's like totally, like it's not awkward for me. I'm sure for the recipient it's awkward.
Yeah, yes, yes. I think you can get better and more direct at being awkward. And I think that's a virtue. So I mean, yeah, like we just talked about the difficulty in the midst of friendship, forgiveness, but there's a difficulty at the beginning, and that is, how do you initiate this thing? How do you kick these things off? And when you say the kinds of things you just said, I'm used to hearing it, right? I think about it. But to anybody on the outside, they'd be like, are you dating? Like, wait, are you talking to a woman? What is going on here? Because you actually recognize the awkwardness is coming from somewhere, because there's this connotation of intimacy and desire and intention. And who knows if this is going to work? Like, I'm worried too. And the story you're referencing is from the very beginning of the book, where my now best friend, approached me in high school next to the lockers and was like, should we be best friends? And it goes down in history as one of the most awkward and important moments in my life. And I love that C.S. Lewis names this in his book, The Four Loves, the essay on phileos. Yeah, he says that almost all friendships start with some moment of saying, oh, you too see the world this way, or you too love this weird thing that I love. And once you realize you connect on something in the world, through semi-articulate fumblings of friendship is born, he writes. And I just think there is a divine wisdom there. Going back to my favorite book, Genesis, the creation narrative, you have the example of God speaking the world into existence. And we could probably do a whole podcast. Actually, I know that I could, on what that means for humans and words. But the sentence version would be that we're made in the image of God. And Adam's first vocation in the garden as an image bearer is to speak and organize the world into reality by naming it. So this wild thing that we actually do with our bodies, by the way, like we resonate air, we shake the air with our vocal cords, and it's recognizable to other people, and it creates this spell or even magic. I don't think it's too far to go. You know, the root of spell obviously is like to put letters together into words. It is, and people call it magic, they call it a spell, because there's this wild divinity in our image of godness when we say what we mean and name the world. And all that, like, you know, sort of waxing on Genesis here, all that comes into play in an awkward but important moment when you look at a friend and be like, we should lean into this. And, you know, you could get less awkward, like, you know, using phrases like, we should lean into this, we should do this more, bro, this has been so fun, let's do this again. Or it could be like, should we be best friends? It could be like, I have no one to
We could
talk to
just become
about
best
this.
friends.
I really want to somebody to talk about this. Would you be the person that will talk to me about this? I mean, but I'll end with this. My wife puts it, and I love it, is that we all just need to become more awkward. And I agree,
So
because we
good.
all need to say what we mean more, particularly when it comes to relationships. And one of the best way to kick them off, and one of the best ways to dig deeper and to fix them, is to say what you mean.
Yeah, I love that. Stu, I know you have a great question. One point to that, I've also found, and literally in that same conversation I had today, I said, here's the deal. Like when we have these conversations or when I say what I said, there's a chance you reject that. And I said, there's probably three other dudes I want to reach out to and just have a conversation with. But here's the thing. No matter what, my prayer is that if I'm willing to say how I feel about you, even if it's not received in the way that I hope, maybe that awakens in you the desire to find the person that you want to have that
Yes.
relationship with. And not only that, but I firmly believe no matter what the result is, and not going into that conversation with the result with an end state in mind, but if I go into that conversation and I'm honest with you and I tell you how I feel, there's a blessing in that no matter what results tomorrow,
100%.
right?
100%.
And that in and of itself, very selfishly for me, to be able to speak life into somebody else and attempt to honor God through that is beautiful in and of itself.
Yeah, I think that in and of itself is a form of encouragement where they might not see it, the relationship might not work, but for you to say, I really appreciate you, and actually I would love to spend more time together, is a form of speaking life into them that they may never take you up on. But I think in the same way, our prayer and hope would be that those words are not lost, that they also, like God's words, they return fertile. At some point, that guy looks back and is like, why did he find me worth spending time with? Like, and that there's an encouragement there. So I think seeds are planted. And that's, by the way, we can come back to this, but I think it's very, very important to know in the topic of friendship that things are worth doing, even if we don't know where they're going. Like Jesus found it worthwhile to speak friendship to the people who were going to betray him later that night. And by the way, he knew where that was going. So it is worth taking the risks that we take, and friendship will always be a risk. So I just want to, we can come back to that, but just wanted to plant that there.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting to me that I mean I see my kids do this all the time, and it's easy for them, right? You know, they're on the
Mm,
playground or they're in the public pool, and like I hear kids be like, "Hey, do you want to be friends? Like, do you want to play
yeah,
together?"
yeah,
And it's
yeah.
so easy for them, but as time goes on, as we get more mature into adulthood, it's so much harder.
Yeah, and we get rejected.
You get rejected,
You learn to be afraid and
right?
pull the fig leaves up.
That's right. That's right. Something I wanted to hit on that I think is really important for a lot of our listeners is geography.
Mm,
And I think there's a big mistake that happens with military veterans because we're in this space where we kind of get forced into relationships and forced into friendships by
mm-hmm,
proximity through the military, through your commands, your squadrons, the people that you're serving with. But every 3 to 4 years, you're moving,
mm-hmm.
and you get these really close friendships around the family, but then you leave. And I think a lot of us still feel like we have these close friendships, and it's easy to maintain those friendships even if they're at a long distance. And we don't try to make new friendships in proximity specifically when like we're done with the military, when we hang it up, when
Right.
we're not moving
Right.
ever again, and we start to establish roots. I think we long for and continue to try to strive for those friendships that are far away, but we make no new efforts to make friendships in proximity to each other.
Right.
And I think it's so important to hit on this for that fact that we're failing in this arena. And I think there's so many other things currently in our culture that are hindering us from having these geographic in proximity relationships and friendships. And I'd be curious, like, what's your thoughts on that? Because you talk a lot about like choosing work over, friendships and all these
Yeah.
cultural things that are happening right now that are impacting us to not get close.
Right. I would start by naming the virtue that I do think the military builds in a lot of people of the ability to catalyze friendships wherever you are. Um, I think I experienced some of this with my missionary work in China. Like my wife and I uprooted right after college and moved to China. And it was such an important time in our life to make all these new relationships and learn to make them cross culturally, then have to come back and remake new ones in law school. And then we uprooted again 3 years later. And by the time we rooted where we are in Richmond, Virginia, we had been through a college phase, a missionary in China phase, a law school phase. And I think probably similar to my experience with military kids is a lot of them get really good at talking to people, being charismatic, like kicking off conversations. And so I want to affirm all that. Like there's actually a strength in the training to build new friends and kind of do the awkward thing we just talked about. But the risk is that you start to think, well, that's the way life is and should be, and I should do nothing to change that. And particularly, that risk is extremely high in a world where we are, all but taught that friendship doesn't need to be embodied and that relationships take a second, third, even fourth place to, work, a neat place you'd like to live, a good social media backdrop for your pictures that you want to take. And I say that actually literally because I've had people say um, things like that, where it'd be like, I don't know, I just feel like honestly, there'd be better pictures if I move here. I'm like, that's a wild.
Yeah, it's Colorado. That's what it is. I'm in Colorado, dude. The Rockies in the background,
Yeah.
and it's
I
beautiful.
mean,
Yeah.
it fits. Hopefully you actually go hike the mountains too, right? So, but so yeah, we are much more like plants than not. We thrive when we're rooted and we're rooted in the same place and begin to really dig our roots in. And I think our families need that a lot more than we think. Like we might have been able to do this through our 20s, right? Or maybe through our teen years, but now we have kids and wives that they need people. And so I just want to flip the default. I don't want to say that it's not good to move for a call. Like, in fact, I'm the one who moved to China for a call. I just want to flip the default and say, absent the Lord's call to do otherwise, we should make it the cultural default that we root with friends. And that might mean moving out to Denver so you can be hanging with David and Stu all the time. Or it might be moving to Richmond so you can hang with Justin and all the crew here. And like we have a great community here. It might mean staying where you are with your family. Like it can mean a lot of things, but that's a little bit different than saying what I was tempted to say after law school. And that was why I could get the best, most highest paying, and most prestigious looking lawyering job in New York City or DC or Shanghai, China. And the reason we picked Richmond was because in the end, we realized our life as a married couple for Lauren and I, as a family, and as our general calling to be not alone in the world was going to thrive a lot more if we moved to Richmond and live in close proximity with a lot of other friends. And I'll tell you, Stu and David, um, over a decade later, that is the wisest decision that we have ever made. And also probably the most high impact. I mean, we live, praise God, in a community of friends. And y'all, we have like tons of young kids and we have tons of demanding jobs. And we have travel and all these complications. It's not like we're just like in a peaceful commune where we all hang out together, but we're in the backdrop of geographic community that makes it easier than not to say, hey, it's 9 o'clock on Friday and I just got around to texting, but does anybody want to come over and just like chat for an hour? And it's like, yeah, actually it's pretty low cost of doing that. And that's the amazing gift of geography. Like a friend has a problem, we're there. somebody needs babysitting, we're there. I mean, one of my friends, Matt, who I write about in the book, this is like last year, it's like middle of the night. It's like, can somebody come to our house to stay with the kids? I got to take my son to the hospital. It's like, we're there. Those things are incredible moments of friendship that we don't have when we live and emphasize remote enough. And I can wax about some of the goodness of technology and how that gives us relationship across time and space, which is good, but it's just not, it shouldn't be the default. The default should be root geographically.
Well, yeah, one of the things that really resonates with me when you talk about it, and I think about my kids, it makes me a little emotional, but I love it, is all the uncles and aunts they have, right? Like it's not
Yeah, yeah,
Stuart and Crystal, it's Uncle Stewie and Auntie Cray Cray, right? Like
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not, they've got Uncle Big Al's and Uncle Dave's and Auntie Gatinas, like made up names, but these are and my kids actually they asked me, they're like, Dad, because then my brother came into town, Tio and Tia, and he's like, okay, my younger kids, and like, okay, so Tio and Tia, so that is our aunt and uncle. They're related.
Hmm.
Got a
They
lot of
are,
aunts and
that's your
uncles.
brother,
Right,
right?
right, right,
So what is Uncle Dave? What's Uncle Stu? I'm like, well, friends are the family that we choose.
right,
And so
right.
they are our family and we love them as such. But they're not, there's a difference in blood. But it was a fascinating conversation and I loved it. And you talk about, you guys are aunts and uncles, right? It's not
Yes, yes.
Justin and whatever, it's Uncle Justin or whatever you are.
Yeah, right.
And so I love that aspect of friendship, and because you're passing that on, and the fact that my kids are confused about that, the biology behind it,
That
I'm just
should,
like, dude, I love that. I love that. I hope that they embrace that, and I hope that their
yeah.
kids are equally more so confused.
I think confused kids in this respect is a big win.
Yeah,
Like it's a
big win,
big win.
big win.
When I was a missionary in China, um, it was so confusing because they refer to each other with familial terms very often, like, "Oh, this is your older brother," and I was like, "Oh, you guys are brothers." So it's like, well, I mean, like he's just my buddy, but like we've known each other a long time. I was like, oh, but then I slowly realized like I like this. Anybody
Mhm.
with close proximity and relational currency, if it's a male, they start to get called your uncle because you're looking up to him in some way. And it was part China, I think, that made me think that is a wiser way to live, far more communal. And the foreigner is confused, and like kids get confused. But what a beautiful confusion when your friends
Awesome.
are like family and your family is becoming like friends. I think that is like a wonderful inheritance for children to experience.
I love that. I love that. I want to go back. One thing you said shifting the default, and one of the things you highlight in your book is that the default currently is this is getting just kind of sucked into a current, and it's a current of loneliness. It's by not making choices to be intentional, which is the default.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, you are choosing what inevitably ends in loneliness. You're choosing a path. You're choosing
Yeah,
to
yeah.
drift, I think is how you frame it. And so I
Hmm.
want to highlight that. And here's a question. It's probably a little bit unfair, but I'm gonna put you on the spot
Oh,
with it.
now I'm intrigued.
Yeah. And so you have, and I'll just read them out. There's 10 different chapters on, there's vulnerability, honesty, covenant, forgiveness, invitation, geography, time, communication, memory, and worship. These are I don't want to call them steps, 'cause it's not necessarily sequential, but these are the aspects, the art
The
of
arts. Yeah,
friendship.
yeah.
Uh, which one of those would you say is the most important?
Covenant or forgiveness. Um, if I had to choose. Because oh man, this is hard, David. This is hard.
Yeah, I
Because
told you it was going to be an
then
unfair
yeah,
question.
it's unfair. I think I'm going to say covenant and forgiveness because those are capacious. Like they hold a lot of ideas. Um, to me, covenant deals with the unknown future, and forgiveness deals with the difficult past. And that brings friendships out of the moments of enjoyment that are kind of easy. Like anybody can have a good time with somebody, but it's hard for us to forgive the past and promise into the future. And I think it's those two things that go together. And you see this in the life of Christ. I mean, this is the core of his teaching on friendship. When you get to John 15, this is like the high watermark of this narrative in the Bible. If we started in Genesis with we're made for other people, but sin has put us into this loneliness and hiding. John 15 is where Jesus comes and says, I know you fully. Like, you are sinners, but I love you anyway. And he calls them friends. He says, I don't call you servants, but friends, because I've disclosed everything to you. So in this idea of covenanting with people, you have, me, um, I'm disclosed to you. The fig leaves are gone, the bushes are gone, I'm fully known. And yet in that state, because my past is forgiven and the future is promised, relationship can be restored to Eden. And this is where I'm trying to communicate in a couple different ways. I'll just say it blatantly here. Friendship is not just a good idea. It's kind of the core theme of the gospel that God made us to be friends with him and others. Sin messed that up. Jesus is giving it back, and we're promised a community with God and God's people in the end. It's sort of the main thing. And that's why I think this idea of covenant friendship is important, because that's admittedly my idea, but it's the way of taking friendship, which is a word we're tired of or confused about and doesn't seem to mean all that much, and elevating it to this core theme of the gospel. But that requires this reality of forgiveness. And that's the past being forgiven and the future being promised. And Jesus is the archetype of that kind of friendship. So I think those are the twin arts, David, that win the prize, because it's in one way, it's just to say, be like Jesus, walk into people's lives, and despite all the trouble, forgive it. And despite all the unknowns about the future, commit to it, like forgive and covenant. And there you have the future and the past coming together into this beautiful thing we call friendship.
Mm. Well, and the most risk to be hurt in those two, I think that you
Yeah.
risk
Well,
rejection, and you risk being hurt and having to forgive. I mean, those are big lifts, right? Those are you're putting yourself out there
you
in
you you
those
do.
two.
G.K. Chesterton has a great quote where I think he says a prom a covenant is making a promise with ourselves in the future, or making an appointment with ourselves in the future. And it's this idea that I'm going to try to act the same in the future as I want to now. And that's the hard thing about life, right? Because we get hurt in the meantime. But without it, I just want to say, I guess, yes, it's risky. But without it, life is so much more risky. Life is so much more difficult. Life is so much harder, because we don't know where we'll be. We don't know who might be around to love us. And really, I think covenant is, I mean, God shows it to us all the time. It is to kind of like along there with words, because we do it by words. It's such an image of God bearing thing when we say, I'm going to stick with you, or I'm going to be this kind of father. I'm not leaving you. Like, I mean, just think about this in fatherhood, right? I often tell my kids in the evening, not in a weird way, but I'll say, God loves you, Jesus died for you, and the Holy Spirit is with you. So I'm going to love you. I'm going to sacrifice for you, and I'll never leave you. And they hear that, like, it's like second nature. They're probably not even listening. They're thinking about can I get out of bed now? Can I have a snack now? And the answer is no. Like, you got to go to bed. but like in this moment, it's becoming normal to them that I will never leave you. That's not on the table. Like, that's not an option. I know that 50% or more people do that. That's not where we follow Jesus. We stick together because he stuck with us. And that ethic completely extends into relationships, rather than saying, well, they hurt me. They said something bad about me. They betrayed me. They didn't keep my confidence. Is this idea, well, yeah, they're sinners too, but we're going to try to fight this out and stick with each other. Of course, friendship is not marriage. There's some important distinctions, but that covenantal ethic, I think, is the difference between being like the rest of culture, which cancels people, calls them toxic, and then throws them out like disposable cups that are like can never be used again, right? Instead of saying, you have problems just like me, but let's work together through this. That is a gospel response to sin in relationship. And it's also the core of friendship.
That's awesome, dude. I want to show you this. This was not staged. This is over about 18 months old.
Oh,
So
right.
this is there's a level of
2048, I think I see.
2048, right? And what that
It's
represents for us is 50 years of friendship. And so what I'm showing for anybody
whoa.
listening is Stu got me a bottle of wine, And knowing Stu, this will probably be like vinegar by the time we open it. But he got a bottle
Costco
of
special,
wine.
baby.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. We're gonna use bread. We're gonna dip. It's gonna be a bread dip versus a
Yeah.
wine.
Yeah.
But there's a level of commitment and there's a level of just love in saying. So what it is, it's a bottle of wine that Stu got me. Put a sticker on it, the Kinetic Man sticker, and wrote 2048. And this comes directly from your book, but it's covenant friendship and it's a commitment that in 2048 we're going to open this bottle of wine and we'll be celebrating 50 years of friendship.
Mm,
And it'll be give me a little emotional. It'll be a beautiful thing,
mm,
but again, it's not marriage. It's not something that it's not. But what it is
yeah.
beautiful, powerful, and above all, in the model of and honoring to God, which is
Amen. Amen.
incredible, right?
And I think it's a radical thing to put on display. And I love how it's sitting on display behind you. It's such a radical thing to put on display in our current cultural moment to show, I think of them as bonfires, show these fires of friendship in the cold, dark wilderness of our loneliness epidemic and say, we live differently and there's a different way to live. And that I think is so people want to pull up to that, right? Like you see a bonfire, you're like, I want to get in that circle. And that we need more gestures of covenantal friendship like this to make it normal and to like light the fire, show our children. Like I hope your kids ask about that, right? Like I know my kids ask about the bottles that we have, and we need it. We need that.
Yeah, I got a little emotional myself when you're talking about it. Um, hey, with a few minutes left, I want to talk about
Yeah.
technology and communication. Um,
Yeah.
I feel like that, and you said it could be a powerful, positive thing, but it can also be a very, big hindrance to our friendships. And you said that we use technology for what it was made for. Can you hit on that? Like how can we use technology in a good way, and how do we need to protect ourselves from technology that could hinder our friendship?
Yeah. I, I'll try to be brief because you could do a lot on this,
Yeah.
right? But going back to my favorite book of Genesis, God calls us to make, right? We're creators. So it is fundamentally good that we develop stuff. I am not a Luddite in the camp of we just need to go back. No. But everything we develop has what theologians would call a telos or a purpose. Like an invention is for something. And so Christians want to look at the world and we want to say, everything should be for the glory of God and the love of humans. As in, it should help us to love God and love each other more. Okay. Which to do that, you have to think like, who are we and how are we made? And so here's the problem that we find so often with technology is that it has an incorrect telos. It is to make life easier and able to be done alone when life is not should not always be easier and actually should be done together. And it assumes that we might be happier if we can be. I mean, I think Meta is the weirdest and most stark example of this. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg is betting his future. And you get, by the way, some entrepreneurs, who are like, oh, whoa, this person's a real visionary. This person's a real, and I don't mean to come down hard on Zuckerberg, but I don't think he is. I think he got really, really lucky and now is fabulously wealthy, but has not really thought about, to the extent that I can tell, what a human being is and what we're made for. And so you can get these weird ideas that, like, actually, we would be happier if we're living in a virtual world. And it just seems so obvious to me that we will be more miserable. We will be more in poverty emotionally for it. And so technology tends to, because of the entrepreneurs who push it this direction, suggest to us that that is the good life. And I just want to be super clear with all believers. It's like you have to look to the Bible and who the Bible says you are for your vision in these things. And then we make a distinction. So, we were made to be in relationship, embodied relationship. That's the good life. So we should think of technology as tools for that. And I use the snacks and meals metaphor. I think embodied relationship is the meal. Okay. technological connections are snacks. And we know a couple things about that. We know that snacks can be delicious. They can be helpful in bridging us to the next meal. But we also know that if you just eat snacks, you have the feeling of being full, though your body is completely unnourished, and you will wither away and even die from it. And that is totally true with our souls and technology. I love my text chains with friends. Like, I love it. But I'm going to try to elevate that to a phone call. And I love that I can call friends, but I'm going to try to elevate that to a FaceTime. And I love that we can do a video Zoom. But if I'm ever in Colorado, I want to elevate that to an in-person. And, I just want people to be thinking up the ladder and thinking as like you want to eat less and less snacks, more and more healthy ones, and ideally more and more embodied meals, because that's what we're made for. And just don't mistake that. We live in a culture, food wise, like actually, where technology and food are kind of the same problem. It's so easy to poison your body and poison your soul by living in, chemically altered, weird, fake foods and digitally altered, weird, fake relationships. Don't do that. That's not who you were made to be.
I love that. And that little section, social media snacking, I love that. And I
Yeah,
just want to read
so good.
the last line that you say in that section. When we spend our relational time snacking on technology, we will die from the preventable disease of loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's fascinating, dude. This book. Well, and let's make not if you're ever in Colorado, but when you come to Colorado, we will definitely
Yes,
make
let's
it
go. There you go.
an in person gathering and do some things. We're
We
big
prefer
huggers.
on the mountain.
We're
Let's
big
go.
huggers. Like
Let's
we do a lot of hugging. So
outside of Denver, right?
Yeah,
yes,
All right, so
yeah,
I need to come to Denver to get my hug. All right, I'm in.
yep.
that's right.
Come to
I'm
Denver.
in.
Let's go. But hey, this book, I cannot recommend it enough. And actually, I think one of the commitments I'm going to do is go buy a bunch of these and just start passing them out on the awkward conversations. Like, hey, dude, I just really want to be your friend. Here's an awesome book. It's about Jesus, about friendship, and let's giddy up.
Oh man, I
Because
love that.
it's that impactful. It was really, really, it spoke very deeply, and obviously, you know, it impacted us in a way that we're doing covenant friendship 50
Praise God,
year
man. It's so cool.
celebrations and just things that are absolutely critical to life, right? And
Yeah.
not snacking through our way through life, but like no kidding, have hearty, relational, deep interactions. And so, dude, you will absolutely not see on this side of heaven the impact that this book has made, but that's something to look forward to, I think, for you.
Oh man, praise God. I can't wait to share that bottle or one similar to it with you guys in the kingdom to come.
Awesome. I
That'll be a
love
good
it.
vintage.
I love it.
Justin, where do we send more people to read your books, learn about you and everything that you're doing?
Two best ways would be at justinwhitmelearly.com, and Google will get you there. You sign up for my email list there. I keep people updated on new books I'm writing, thoughts I'm thinking. And then Instagram is the other place where I post videos a lot about habits, parenting, friendship, and stuff like that. So depending on what you want to do, you can listen to me criticize social media on social media or just sign up for
There you
my
go.
email list. Like both are good.
It's interesting. We have a text chain within the Kinetic Man group, and last night one of the guys was talking about like parenting challenges and being a dad and
Hmm.
struggling with punishment and stuff like that. And I found one of your posts about
Yeah,
about
awesome.
being a dad and posted it in there, and it was very helpful for him. So
Well, yeah, I hope it helped. As much as like you heard me rail on social media and meta, there are really good sides. It's just don't make the
yeah,
snack the meal. And there's a lot of wonderful uses for getting your message out there, getting your podcast out there, putting great content out there.
yeah, man. And we didn't even hit on it. I have both books in the back here, The Common Rule and Habits of the Household, both fantastic books as well. Appreciate everything you do, man. Thanks for joining us, and can't wait to hug it out in Colorado when you come.
I love it. Thank you, brothers.
Man,
Keep the fire of friendship burning.
Thanks, Justin.
thank you, Justin.